Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June Planning Commission meeting. We will start with a roll call from David, please.
Acting Chair Banton.
Present.
And we'll assume Chair Boaz. All right, Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
Commissioner Fowler.
Present.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Present.
Commissioner Hubman. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Williams. And you do have a quorum.
All right. Thank you very much. We will move forward with the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bradley, seconded by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Call for vote, please.
Chair Banton.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler.
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Aye.
The motion passes with all present voting yes.
Great. Thank you very much. All righty, a couple of action items tonight, each with a public hearing. And then after those items, we have a couple of informational updates and discussion items. So I'm sure it's going to be a fun, jam-packed evening this evening. But first off is a rezoning application for 2859 McNair. And I will hand it over to James.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. The rezoning is technically for the adjacent parcel at 2861 McNair. I corrected that in the, not in what you've got. That's correct now.
All right.
All right, let's see if this thing actually works for me now. I was promised it would. Wonderful. Here we go. All right. So this is a rezoning by petition. Our purpose here is to review it, make sure that the rezoning complies with the strategic land use plan, and ultimately to find the petition to be in conformity with the strategic land use plan and to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen. First of all, an overview. There are two parcels that will be affected by this rezoning because this is a rezoning related to a boundary adjustment. Those of you who were with us a couple months ago, there was a very similar rezoning on South Grand. Two parcels, adjoining parcels, are agreeing to a boundary adjustment. They are in different zoning districts. Therefore, we need to rezone the portion of the parcel in question in order to not have a dual zone parcel. The applicant is with us this evening, Rihanna Kastner. She'll speak and will be available for some questions later. Real high level stuff, so you know where we're coming from. This is a tiny piece of land. It's about 4 feet by 42 feet. Realistically, not a lot is going to change on either of these parcels. There's no anticipated land use change. There's no anticipated project that's going to happen. We are just doing the due diligence of bringing our zoning code in conformity with existing land use. There we go. The reason why this rezoning is important is that the occupant of the residence, that's the owner of the adjoining parcel at 2859 McNair, the entrance to his house, the primary entrance to the residence, is actually accessed from a concrete walkway that crosses onto the parcel at 2861 McNair. So this will allow the owner of 2859 to actually own the piece of land that he has been using for the entirety of his occupants to enter his house. We'll see some pictures to describe in further detail the appropriateness of this boundary adjustment and the rezoning. As I said, there's no expected change in land use. There's going to be no significant impact on use, reuse, access, or the potential redevelopability of either of these lots. So let's look at the current zoning on these two parcels. The subject parcel is currently within the F neighborhood commercial district, and the adjoining parcel, which will subsume the portion of the subject parcel, is in the C multiple family dwelling district. Technically, the entitlements on the portion of the subject parcel will be decreased, but no expected land uses is going to change. And the previous land use and the current or the proposed future land use of this portion of the parcel, it's in alignment with the C district. Not very complicated here. Let's take a look at our good friend, the brand new strategic land use plan. Both parcels are within a medium intensity neighborhood. These areas are primarily residential. They do offer, or they do allow and encourage some level of neighborhood serving commercial and institutional uses. The existing parcel at 2861 McNair currently holds a former church. It's vacant right now. Essentially, like both the existing and the proposed zoning districts are compatible with the medium intensity neighborhood because there's no planned construction. There's no site plan recommendations to make at this time. We don't really get to use the full powers of the sloop. It's just we're doing our due diligence here. Let's take a look at the parcels in question. As you can see at 2861, it's a former church with a portion of the parcel paved asphalt parking. The adjoining parcel 2859 McNair is the white roofed house immediately to the north. I'll show a couple of pictures that I took earlier today. As you can see, we're looking west across McNair at 2859. You can see the tiny concrete walkway that leads to the owner's front door. This is a shot from the intersection of McNair and Pestalozzi. Looking at the church itself, you can see 2859 behind it. Then also shot from the alley behind the two parcels. As you can see, there's a existing chain link fence, which actually basically lines up with the parcel line. But the owner of 2859 has been using that additional almost 6 feet between his building and the church building as his own backyard. That was sort of the understanding. But moving forward, we want to make sure that the owner has appropriate access. You're going to see in some additional photos that there are some air conditioner units in between the church and the residence. And we want to make sure that both the resident and the church, the owner of the property, it's not a church anymore, have appropriate access to those utility installations. All right, now I'm going to bring up or ask Rihanna to come up if there's anything you want to add. And I've got your pictures are loaded in here if you want to.
I mean, I don't really have anything to add other than we're just fixing something that should have been corrected a long time ago. Essentially, the building that they knocked down in order to build the church was originally connected to the 2859 residence. And when they knocked that building down, they never fixed the boundary line. So.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. We will now move to, actually, is there any comments from zoning staff? No? Okay. Seems fairly straightforward. Great. Could I have we'll move to the public hearing. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. If there's anyone here for the public hearing, either in person or online, if you're online, please
can we-
post in the chat.
Sorry, can we have a previous roll?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Previous roll.
Oh,
Thank
previous-
you.
Any objections to previous roll? Great, thank you. Thank you, David. The public hearing is now open. As I was saying, if you have any comments online, please post in the chat. Is there anyone here in person for the public hearing? Anyone online? Nope. Okay. With that, I have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Previous roll.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sterling, seconded by Commissioner Garmendia. Call for previous roll. Any objections? Great, and the public hearing is now closed. With that, I will move to any questions the commissioners may have. I'll just go down the line here.
No questions, thank
Okay,
you.
Commissioner Bradley,
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Just thank you to the petitioner for coming out, for your generous gift to your neighbor. The only question I had, you answered, which is why was the building that didn't have a front door built before or after?
One of the other pictures, you can see the original foundation.
So, I was like, is this new construction? Without a front door. But no, so thank you for the little bit of history that led to this problem.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Fowler?
No questions. I think this is a great gift to have for that person that owns the residence. The only question, can you go back to that picture that's looking where the AC units are?
Mhm.
I would just only pull up or bring up that I worry about the steps that go down that presumably are still,
I think that's an older picture. He
Okay.
did have the deck rebuilt.
that's what I was worried
So
about.
that- He had it rebuilt after,
Great. It's great that the AC units all are in there and they have access. So that's the only thing I was kind of worried about. I did look at some photos from like aerials and stuff. I was like, it looks like it's been redone. So all good.
So let me have a question here. So on that same question, so when the gate, you come through the gate, you're on that walkway, is that correct?
in the back.
Yeah,
No.
that's not the gate, that's the back.
So this is in the backyard looking towards the front, and that's just a fence. That's not a gate.
I see.
Yeah.
That's
There's a blue line. It's kind of hard to see. on that.
right. So the blue line is the border,
The blue line will be the
new boundary.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all right, okay. So your air conditioner, the air conditioner on the building is still kind of on,
So there's two sets of air conditioners. The ones at the
Condi-
top belong to the residents.
That's
and
right.
then, yeah, the ones back here belong to
and they look like they're still, that condenser still looks like it's a little bit on their property.
It is, but he and I are fine with
R-
that.
right,
We had talked about
right,
it.
right,
Yeah, and
okay.
they're older, so when they get replaced, they'll get moved. somewhere
Okay,
else.
okay.
Commissioner Jorgensen? Alderwoman Schweitzer?
No questions, thanks.
Am I missing anyone else online? Nope, that's it. No additional questions for me. So thank you very much for the presentation. Do I have a motion on the floor? Wow. Can you give us your recommendation,
love
please,
to.
James? Thank you.
So our staff recommendation is that the planning commission finds that the petition for the proposed zoning district map amendment for the parcel known as 2861 McNair Avenue in city block 1418 to be in conformity with the strategic land use plan and therefore recommends approval to the Board of Aldermen.
Great.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, seconded by Commissioner Jorgensen. Call for vote.
Roll call. Chair Banton,
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
and the motion passes with all present voting yes.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, as I smile here with the staff's good work, your good questions, and the discussion we had, and the applicant came, one of the things we may undertake and achieve is that in the new zoning overhaul, there may be a simpler way to do this. One of the things I'm smiling about is that we were sort of measuring staff time to do this simple thing.
Great.
And you did a
Addition-
great job, by the way.
Thank you. Just Rihanna, would you mind saying, when did this process start for you?
With the city,
Sure. Yeah, that's us.
I would say in February or March.
That's fast,
Took a minute. Thank you all.
unfortunately.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, we move on to our remaining action item, which is reforming minimum lot sizes. And with that, we have a presentation from Miriam.
Yes, and I will launch into the kind of detailed analytical presentation that I prepared in a second. But like before doing that, Alderman Cohn is here. He is planning to sponsor this, or whatever the planning commission recommends. So, and he has to leave shortly here. So I want to make sure he has a chance to share brief remarks, but I do want to provide a little bit of context for kind of how we're here for the members of the public attending or tuning in. So we are, as a city, in the process of completely upgrading the zoning code. This is the first of 4, I'll say at least, and we'll come back to that toward the end of the meeting, kind of near-term zoning reforms that we're taking on that the Planning Commission has prioritized as kind of near-term patches to our existing zoning code to remove barriers to housing, accommodate new uses, and also manage new and emerging uses. So those 4 are minimum lot size, ADUs, which are going to be on the agenda for July, cannabis cafes, and then having a way of regulating data centers as well. And then we're going to later in the meeting adjust some potential additions to that. But I just wanted to provide that context that this is not intended to be the end all be all for how we improve zoning regulations for housing. This is intended to kind of keep some really common sense things out of the variance process so they can move forward quickly because our city is in deep need of quality housing options, and we're trying to remove all barriers to that, minimum lot size being one, and our zoning codes kind of silence on accessory dwelling units being a very important second one. So that will be coming, and then a great deal more to come through the zoning upgrade process more holistically. But before I launch into everything, I want to ask Alderman Cohen if he has any remarks to share.
Thank you, Miriam. And thank you, esteemed commission. I am very excited to be here this evening. Unfortunately, I have another event over at City Hall that I have to also be at. So I won't be able to stay for the entirety of the presentation, but have already been briefed by Miriam and others on the staff with respect to both the recommendations of the staff and the proposed legislation. This is something some of you may recall as an action item that's been on my deck for several years now. And with the assistance of President Green's office and others, we've been able to get it prioritized here over the planning department. And so this is really something that I think is just smart in terms of helping to bring development into the city. As Miriam will probably reference in some of the presentation materials, many of the lot sizes in the city of St. Louis, particularly those owned by LRA, are less than 4,000 square feet. And while not necessarily a requirement, somehow SLDC and LCRA have kind of mandated these to be 4,000 minimum square feet, even though those LRA lots are grandfathered. They somehow, some way get requirements of 4,000 square feet for single family use unless they go for a variance. And so those things take time, they slow down processes. It's very frustrating, especially since they're grandfathered. But many of the lot sizes in our city, particularly those east of Grand, are going to be, in the range of about 3,000 to 3,500 square feet. They largely are under that 4,000 square foot capacity. And so the information that's going to be shared with you tonight, I am very supportive of. I look forward to continuing the debate with the legislation that will be introduced at the Board of Aldermen, and would ask for your favorable consideration. And I'm sure there'll be a lively discussion around it this evening as well. But want to extend my thanks to Don and the team, Miriam and others, for their hard work in putting the presentation together tonight, and look forward to recapping tonight's discussion and hopefully your favorable vote on the recommendations from the staff. Thank you.
Right, with that, I will begin with the kind of formal presentation here. So this is a zoning text amendment. All of those include public hearings. So we'll anybody here or online will have the opportunity to speak in a moment. And this step at the Planning Commission is how zoning text amendments can be kind of initiated and then considered as part of the legislative process. So where we are tonight is kind of the first formal step in initiating that change. A little bit of a background on what a minimum lot size regulation is. In a lot of cities and in St. Louis, with many kind of old school zoning codes like we have for now, minimum lot size is the main tool used to regulate residential density. And the way it works is each unit of housing must have, fill in the blank, number of square feet of lot area. So it's not the total lot, it's the lot area per unit. This also, and this is significant, especially in St. Louis, this impacts not just what lots are buildable, but how lots can be platted. So a lot of the times where we see this being a real issue and hang up in housing development processes is a developer will buy a larger lot that probably honestly used to be 2 smaller lots, and they will seek to subdivide it to some lot size below 4,000 square feet. And in that review process, it kind of sends up a red flag, like, oh no, this would create a non-conforming lot. It needs a variance even for that subdivision to be approved. That is kind of the most common pathway through which these issues end up at the Board of Adjustment, which is extra step in the process. It can add time and by extension costs, and sometimes kind of frustration and confusion to the housing development process. So that's part of what we're trying to fix. Want to show you exactly what the regulations look like in the code. This is my hopefully clear dissection of this regulation in the A district. So you can see the different parts of it. So except as provided in section blah, 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 which actually allows 2 family units in the single family district when 40% or more of the block frontage is occupied by 2 family dwellings. So that's all that is. That's a reference to that allowance. There shall be a lot area of not less than 4,000 square feet. That is like the minimum lot size number itself. That's how that looks in the zoning code. But lots of record prior to the effective date of this ordinance, which was 1950, may be used for 1 single family dwelling unit, provided the other yard regulations, which is like front yard setback, side yard setback, rear yard setback, as long as you're cool with those, actually, like, you don't have to conform to the minimum lot size. So what this means is most lots in the city, since they were platted before this ordinance was in effect, of course, our city is a historic city, much of it developed before this zoning code was in place. Most of the lots in our city are buildable at any size for single family housing. So I just want to clarify that. That does not mean this is not a problem, but that is how the grandfathering works in the language of the code itself. Here are the rules in the B 2-family dwelling district, same minimum lot size and same grandfathering language for single family in the 2-family dwelling district. But for 2-family units, there's a minimum lot size, you can see there at the bottom, of 2,500 square feet for each unit, which means, and there's actually no grandfathering provision here, it means that to build a 2-family unit, you need a lot of at least 5,000 square feet. It's a pretty big lot. And then the reference just above that, section 26.24.020.3, is a reference to another part of the code where kind of like how 2-family is allowed in A, depending on the character of the block, multifamily is allowed in B, depending on the character of the block. So that's how things look in the B district. And then things kind of accumulate and get more complicated and less complicated in district C through D, depending on how, or C through E, depending on how you look at it. I think all of this also makes the point that, like, we really need a new code. It was hard for any normal person to understand without talking to the gracious Evan Winkler, Mary Hart Burton, and Catherine Neiman. So here is how all of that looks all together in every one of the districts in which housing is allowed. So for single family, it's important to distinguish between these pre-1950 lots, which are grandfathered, and post-1950 lots, where these regulations kick in. And then for two families, there are different numbers that kind of do decline as you get into the more intensive districts. Once you get into the commercial districts, which are F through I, there's kind of this like calling back to other sort of sister residential districts. And then in the J district, which is an industrial district where housing is not allowed in every case, but in some cases, then again, there's a callback to E. Kind of complicated, whatever. This is how it works right now. So what is the issue? We've talked about parts of it. The lot sizes, and we'll show you what we mean, they're just kind of mismatched to the common existing smaller lot sizes that have historically existed in the city. And that creates a few problems that if everything were built and replatted to comply with these 4,000 square feet minimum lot sizes or 5,000 for two family and so on, it would kind of create more of a suburban development pattern. It would just feel more spacious. It wouldn't feel like the historic city that, that we know and love. It is a very common variance issue, which again adds time and cost to housing development, which is kind of like exactly the last thing we need when housing development, especially on vacant lots, is so important. But even putting all of that aside, larger lots can be a little bit of a barrier to affordability. The larger the lot, the more you're spending on the lot itself, and the higher the cost of housing would be. And then also, and Alderman Cohn referenced this, I think these minimum lot sizes has created confusion about the ability to reuse vacant land. Again, like the last thing we need in a city like St. Louis, where the reuse of vacant land for quality housing opportunities is just very important to our future. And then just to make clear that the reforms we're talking about are very much in keeping with the newly adopted strategic land use plan, which calls to revise regulations to encourage the creation and preservation of a variety of housing types with sensitivity to the surrounding context and historic fabric. So those were really the cues that we were working from, that we want to arrive at regulations that fix these issues, but also allow for housing at lots that are sensitive to the existing character of the city. And so now we get into what is the character of the city. Here's a super standard lot in the city. Like there is sort of a standard block depth, 125 feet. Many lots are 25 feet wide. That gets you 3,100 or 3,125 square feet in a lot that, like, this just is the common size of a lot of lots in our city, already below that minimum that we're forcing people to plat to unless they go through a time-intensive process to seek a variance. So when you apply the side yard, front yard, backyard setbacks, this gets you to a pretty healthy footprint for a single family home or the first unit of a two-family home with our standard lot size. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And then for reference, shout out to Dylan Sabish on our team for many of the graphics you'll see. Some of the kind of standard bedroom and room sizes that are required by the International Building Code that are kind of mimicked also in the International Residential Code. So that is kind of the standard lot. But then, all right. When we look at kind of the distribution of lot sizes in the city, because not every lot's a standard lot, you can see how that stacks up. So each bar is sort of a stack of the lots by zoning district that fall into these different square footage categories. This was also in the staff report draft resolution. So you can see, you know, there are a lot of A district lots that are larger in that 4,000 plus square foot category, but also a lot that exists today that are quite a bit smaller. Getting down to kind of 2,500 square feet is where we really capture most of the existing lots in the city. But since this is maybe like most relevant to infill on vacant land, we also looked at that. And when you look at this distribution, you see more, actually just more vacancy in districts B through E, relatively speaking, compared to all lots in total. And you see more of those smaller lots kicking in. So 2,000 to 2,500, you kind of see more in that category. And we also asked ourselves a question, because this doesn't totally, I think this is very informative to the single family part of the story, but for two families, we looked at kind of all of the two family buildings that exist in the city, what types of lots are they on? And this is what we found. So 86% are kind of 3,000 square feet and above. And then there's many, many fewer below that 3,000 square foot number. So in our recommendation, I just put in for context that above 3,000, we're recommending that that's where we start permitting two family in the A and B districts. A, subject to that 40% of frontage already occupied by two family dwellings. And then C districts and beyond is where we would catch, you know, really like 98, 99% of all types of lots where two families already exist. So again, if we're trying to kind of mimic the historic fabric of the city and designing new regulations, these numbers give us a lot of guidance. This map, I think, also puts a little bit of emphasis on what Alderman Cohn referenced, which is, you know, these are vacant lots that are between that 2,000 to 4,000 square foot range. So vacant lots that are below the current minimum lot size, which again, you know, there's that grandfathering effect, but would be kind of back online with our recommended 2,000 square foot minimum lot size. There is just a prevalence of smaller vacant lots. And so if they're not grandfathered, but it's like they just happen to have been platted post 1950 or had like a tiny little boundary adjustment like we saw in the rezoning earlier, new single family and two family homes would not be permitted on any of these without a variance unless they're grandfathered. The parcel symbology here has been exaggerated, so note that, but shout out to James Pfister for this lovely map. An important question that we sought to answer is like, why keep a minimum lot size at all? Because already like most lots are grandfathered in, meaning there kind of is no minimum for new construction single family on pre-1950 lots. But since, especially for the single family side of this, what we're really talking about is like, what size of lots do we feel is appropriate to make? So when people are replatting a lot or adjusting the boundary of a lot, what is really too small a lot? And this is an example of what we're looking at, you know, what a 15,000 square foot lot would result in if somebody also complied with all of the side yard, front yard, rear yard setbacks. Is this tiny, tiny building footprint. And this is already on a kind of non-conventional lot, only 80 feet deep in the city. Most are deeper. So you'd end up with an only like buildable square, buildable footprint of a building. It's kind of tiny, skinny thing with a 9-foot frontage. Now, of course, people could seek variances from these front yard, side yard setbacks, and there are pathways for that. But again, we're trying to keep people kind of outside of the variance process and just facilitate appropriate housing infill. So we want to avoid creating strange small lots. So we do think a lot size of some size is appropriate. And here is our recommendation. again, just for emphasis, all of the numbers here are per unit. So when we're looking at the recommended 2-family minimum lot size, that's lot size per unit. So really it would be a 3,000 square foot lot required for a 2-family building. But basically, the staff recommendation is to drop the 4,000 square foot minimum to 2,000 square feet to kind of capture an appropriate scope of the types of lots that just naturally fit in the city. And for 2-family, drop the minimum in the A district when 2 families are allowed, and in the B district to 1,500. So all 3,000 square foot lots and above would be permitted to build on by right. And then in District C and beyond, you start needing only a 2,000 square foot or 2,000 square foot lot and so on down the line. Then just a tour of kind of some example lots. So you can see that the lot sizes we're talking about below 4,000 square feet, we sort of know and love and feel very natural and contextual in the city of St. Louis. So here's an example in the B district in the Hamilton Heights neighborhood, 3,300 square feet. How nice. Very, very lovely home on a historic lot. Here's in Hyde Park, here's a 2,200 square foot lot. Cool little bungalow, great starter home type home with a lot of beautiful historic character. And Forest Park Southeast, it's a 2,300 square foot lot. So this is a deeper lot, but still kind of a skinny lot. Here's some more recent construction on actually quite a small lot, close to our recommended minimum for single family, 2,000 square foot lot in the Friends Park neighborhood in the A district was kind of found to be desirable and buildable by the person who built this home. And then switching to a couple of 2-family examples, here's a 2-family building in the Shaw neighborhood in the B district, about a 3,000 square foot lot. And this is kind of a standard depth block. And then another 2-family example, actually in the A district in the Baden neighborhood, again, about a 3,000 square foot lot. So then this is back to the summary of the staff recommendation. And that's what I have. But even though I've talked a lot, Evan, anything to add before the hearing or discussion? Okay. Okay, cool. This was very much a team effort between planning and zoning, as all things zoning policy are.
Great. Thank you very much, Miriam, for that thorough presentation as always. We do have a public hearing for this item, so I'll ask once again, if you are online, please put your name in the chat if you would like to speak for the public hearing, and if you're here in person, please let us know that you would like to speak. But first, I will ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Previous roll.
It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Garmendia and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Call for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing no objections, the public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here in person that would like to speak? Great. Could you please introduce yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Greetings. My name is Enrique Riojas, and I'm a citizen here in St. Louis. I live in Forest Park Developer. Actually, my move-in date to my new apartment was the date of the tornado. So you can imagine how difficult that might have been and how difficult it has been. And I am here to speak in support of this text amendment. I think it would do wonders for the city, especially now. You know, the best time to probably have these regulations in place would have been 40 years ago, but the second best time is now. And I also implored the commission to consider everything else that was in the recent zoning memo sent by the Mr. Don Rowe, especially when it comes to non-conforming uses, ADUs, and extending the scope of conditional use permits. I can't think of anything more important for us to be doing at the moment other than like literally getting the trees off the road. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for participating tonight. Dylan, do we have anyone online? Casey Mosquez, apologies if I mispronounced that. Could you introduce yourself, please, to the commission?
Yeah, my name is Cassie Mascus. I am both a practicing planner and a resident of St. Louis. We just recently moved to Soulard last year, and some of my previous planning work was in affordable housing work. And so I think that this is just a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. We all know that the housing crisis is a national issue. And so anything that we can do to make housing more affordable and more approachable here in our own community, I fully support. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your participation as well. Is there anyone else that we missed that would like to speak at the public hearing? All right, with that, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bradley, seconded by Commissioner Fowler. Call for previous roll. Hearing no objections, the public hearing is now closed. And with that, we will move on to Commissioner questions and discussions. So I will begin this time online with Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. Great presentation as always. I read the materials that were sent to us and I am fully in support of this. I am sure I could come up with so many questions and things to talk about, but I have to head from here to a community meeting and I want to make sure to get a vote in. So I'm going to stop my comments now and just say thank you again. And I look forward to voting yes.
Great. Thank you, Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
I don't have any additional comments either. I share in the same concerns for the barriers, especially in times like these. So thank you for your public comments in the online as well. I'm ready, absolutely ready to support this as well as some other common sense things we're going to do to move our city forward during these times.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bradley.
No questions, just thank you, Miriam, for you and staff, all your work on this. Seems like a no-brainer to me, but it takes a lot of work to get there, right? So definitely in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garmendia.
Thanks. Thank you all for your work on this presentation. It's very fun, very interesting. I left all the data and the maps. I did have one element to discuss, which was you had the slide where you're like, this is too small. And I would beg to differ, but I think the example you showed, it was a small lot. And if we used all the complied with everything else, the building was 9 feet by 30 feet, which is, I just want to note, we're going to be working on tiny homes and ADUs into the future. Tiny homes are built to fit on a trailer, which the dimensions can range from, they tend to be 30 feet long and 8.5 feet wide. So almost an exact match to the example. So I just want to know, I don't mind. This is something that can still happen. You can have a tiny lot and you can get a tiny home on that lot. But if we pass this, they would still have to go through variance.
Can we flip back to that graphic? So depends. If you have a lot like this today, it's grandfathered. You can build anything on it that complies with the International Building Code or International Residential Code, whichever would apply. But if you wanted to plat a lot under our recommendation, less than 2,000 square feet, then you would need a variance still.
Okay, so if we wanted to have a tiny home community, that's the kind of the use case that we would still have a variance for something like that.
And in the past to create, so there are 2 tiny home communities in the city now.
They're not platted.
One is platted. So the way we achieved that was through the planned unit development process, which is kind of built to allow, and I'm going to say a little bit, but then ask if zoning administrator Mary Hart Burton is on, because I wasn't actually around at the time that the city did this, but the plan unit development tool is kind of built to allow flexibility beyond what's allowed via our standard zoning code. And it is a two-step process where it's kind of initial ordinance, a sketch plan submittal, approved at the planning commission, ordinance passed at the board of aldermen, and then the details of the plan come back to the planning commission for final approval. It's actually a tool we've, in the last couple of months, encouraged a few more people to use because it would help more folks comply with, well, bring larger development projects kind of closer to the spirit of the newly adopted strategic land use plan, because our zoning code is so kind of old school and kind of clunky and does have so many issues. So there is a way outside of the variance process to plat smaller lots for a tiny home development. And you could build a tiny home on any number of existing smaller lots. And I think the accessory dwelling unit regulations that we're bringing next week will kind of open up more things. And if the kind of lens through which we're trying to do this kind of baseline minimum lot size is to allow for housing that matches the historic character, I would say allowing tiny homes is kind of a separate topic that is still very important, but maybe
Worthy of a variance in a hearing.
yeah, it's maybe a more context specific consideration, maybe best made through a PUD process, I would advocate. And I think in the new zoning code, and just kind of tossing around ideas we've talked about, like, should there be a tiny home district that people could just rezone to? So we wouldn't proactively say, here on the zoning map is where tiny homes go. But if somebody had a project, there would be a little bit of a smoother pathway than the two-step PUD. So it's a long way of saying it's a little bit of a judgment call, but I think that was kind of the balance we were trying to strike with this one.
Great, yeah, and I concur with our audience member, Enrique. Yeah, I think the tornado kind of highlights just, there's gonna be a lot of use cases where people are gonna wanna build accessory dwelling units or have trailers or tiny homes, maybe on LRA lots near their current homes while they rebuild. So I think this is very timely. And I really appreciate all the effort the team put together on bringing this home.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Fowler.
I'd just like to say this is a great presentation. I liked all the visuals. No real questions. I think the biggest thing, I'm just happy that this is here and we're doing it. I know earlier in this year, we set this as one of the kind of goals to hit. So I'm happy to see it. It's going to break down a lot of barriers for just creating a place with more dense population on, lots that are really unused. And also, I know my personal experience, sometimes I see people that want to do these cool ideas of smaller homes, smaller lots, and it's like, oh, well, maybe that won't work. It'll extend, your timeline for your project. So I think this is a great move for the city. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Jorgensen.
Thank you, Miriam and team, for the great work on this. I'm strongly in support. I want to get it done as quickly as possible, but I would also hope to see it as a first step. I know we have the zoning upgrade coming, and I, like Commissioner Garmendia, I would be interested in a discussion about bringing this minimum lot size down further, or finding other options of zoning, maybe, as I think you mentioned, width instead, or something like that. As I was looking into this, I was looking at cities that have done something similar, maybe gone further. I saw that Houston has a minimum lot size of 1,400 square feet. They did that for much of the city in 1998, and then for the rest, I believe, in 2013. And there was a paper I found on this, I think it was by the Mark Cutter Institute, which noted that it had transformed large swaths of the city with infill construction. I'd say that's exactly what we need. And on the discussion about setbacks and stuff like that, which you showed. Perhaps as we move forward with the zoning upgrade, can we look at the requirements for setbacks or sides and all that? As one member of the public noted, she was from Soulard. A great thing about Soulard is you don't have that, and instead you have fantastic density, and it's just a magical part of the city. So I think that there are ways around that to actually have larger houses on smaller lots.
Yeah, I just want to quickly concur that I think in the upgrade, like my experience, or maybe our collective experience with these little kind of issue specific zoning text amendments is you start pulling a thread and then it's like, oh, I want to change that and that and that and that. And it's like, that's why we're upgrading the whole zoning code. It is hard to figure out how to scope these things that we're trying to do quickly when we are like actively, we're doing both at the same time, these kind of quick fixes, call them, and we're actively working on the complete rewrite. So yeah, I think it's a long way of saying yes. I think we need to make it easy for people to kind of rebuild the historic fabric, and outside of the kind of fire separation issues that really are handled also by the building code, there's no reason not to rethink kind of setbacks.
Sounds great. Yeah, and please don't see my comments as any kind of pushback on this. I'm fully supportive of this. I just want to go further in the future.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
I just wanted to kind of follow up on that point about other cities. So did we look at other cities, minimum lot size? And so are we 2,000? Is that kind of in the middle? Or are we still a little high? Or what's your impression there?
Yeah, I don't know if I have like a complete scan, but we did look around a little bit. I mean, I don't know if this is ironic or what, but 4,000 actually put us kind of in the game already. Like lots of cities have enormous minimum lot sizes, like 8,000, 10,000, 6,000. I don't know how that works for them. It may be similar to ours where it's about platting undeveloped land at the edge of a city. And so it is taking on a more suburban character. And that was the choice. There are cities, as Commissioner Jorgensen noted, that are like coming down to like this 1,500 to 2,000 square foot range. We thought 2,000 felt a little bit more kind of in keeping with our patterns historically as a city. And a lot of cities that have moved to more modern codes have dropped the minimum lot size altogether as the way of handling this and regulate just lot width. I think that's something I would be interested to explore instead, because block depth does vary. We have some standard blocks in the city, but we have some really non-standard blocks. And if what we care about most is the rhythm on a block, then all we should be focused on is width and side yard setbacks and front yard setbacks. So I guess that's my quick take on what I've noticed, but yeah. Oh, please. Yeah.
Evan, I work for the zoning office, but I'd also mention that our form-based codes don't have a minimum lot size, but rather it's per existing. The difference is the structure of our underlying code versus a form-based or a form forward, as we're saying with the rewrite code, where you're allowing different types of uses. So in our form-based districts, you might be able to do a single family, a 2-family, and a 4-family quadruplex in the same district, but you're using whatever lot size is available. And so it kind of allows the market to play a piece in what makes the most sense for that particular parcel. So there is context in this city for no minimum lot size.
Yeah, though it's a better structure.
Any further questions, Commissioner Miller?
No.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, and no comments. Looks great.
All right. Of course, a couple of questions from me. Part of it we already sort of discussed with Commissioner Jorgensen's comments and questions, but just going through those photos of the example sort of houses and 2 families that exist currently, just looking at the photos, it seems pretty clear that they're not meeting what would be the current side yard setbacks. And so I know you said when you start this, that you'd like to, could quickly unravel on all the things that you could touch, but I'm just curious on your thoughts on that as we look at this minimum lot size and as it relates to, because the side yard setback seems like it'd be especially pertinent for this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we could be, it's a little bit of like, where do we stop with these
Yeah.
quick fixes? Also, I'm looking to my building code friends. Even if we had no side yard setback, the fire separation requirement would be 3 feet?
Yeah.
3 feet, unless both property owners agree to kind of up the fire rating of whatever walls are spanning that difference. So a lot of these buildings, when they, we got a nod over here from a the contract. A lot of these buildings were built before these codes were in place. So we will, even if we drop side yard requirements, be constrained to kind of like a minimum 6 feet total. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean,
But
kind
it
of.
depends on also access onto a neighbor's lot for maintenance. How does?
Yeah, I mean, so the city of St. Louis does offer maintenance agreements, which allows you to go all the way to the 0 lot line with the permission of your neighbor, and then it's on file. So if there's problems with, I can't get onto your property to fix my tuck pointing or whatnot, you can still do that. But I do think our side yard regulations are a little bit, like, they don't sync up with our building code regulations. So it can be very frustrating for folks who maybe live next to a vacant property or a property that's owned by an LLC out of the state, and they just can't get the maintenance agreement. And so we're also sending those folks to the Board of Adjustment, unfortunately, when they could maybe just reduce it down to 3 foot and meet the requirements. So it's not that I would be interested in potentially changing that amendment, but we're also balancing that with the overhaul. So maybe up for discussion.
Well, so that's essentially my question. If the goal is to keep people out of the variance process, it seems like that would sort of be a needed part to this. Because you could sure build on now the LRA would sell you this lot where you could build on, but if you really want to build a home that's like similar to your neighbors, you would need a variance for the side lot anyway. So I'm not sure it would, something that could potentially, if we didn't get to it tonight, be looked at in the future potentially prior
It
to
could
the
be.
zoning entire
Yeah.
overhaul.
I think as we get into the kind of tornado recovery discussion, I think we can, because we talked about that in the context of that, and I think for rebuilding structures that used to exist, expanding the allowance for rebuilding non-conforming structures could handle some of that. That wouldn't address the issue for infill, but it is a judgment call. It's kind of like we're driving a car that's on its last leg with this old zoning code, and are we replacing the tires, or are we, I don't know enough about cars to extend this metaphor any further, but I also think in that discussion, I mean, I think I feel very motivated to stay on schedule with that larger upgrade. And, this stuff takes time and attention to think through. So that's my long way of saying, it's a judgment call. Like, do we want to prioritize that above other things, or not? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and if I were making that judgment call, I would say, given the proximity of the overhaul, it seems like just this change alone would open up quite a few opportunities in itself in the meantime. So, however, my second point, something that you and I briefly discussed earlier, if we could go to the graphs that show the makeup of the current vacant lots.
Mhm.
My question is, there seems to be, that one, a large chunk in this 25 to 3,000 square foot range. And while that would be acceptable for our new single family lot, it still puts us under what would be acceptable for our two family. And so, you know, given all of the discussion today about do we even need minimum lot sizes, and also with our upcoming discussion about ADUs and adding additional density to existing lots on a potentially tiny piece of land, I would argue that it might make sense to adjust that two-family limit further to what, 1,500 to 1,250 to allow lots in this 25 to 3,000 square foot range to also sort of forego that variance process. And I'm curious on thoughts from you and Evan on that.
I apologize, everybody. I can't hear Evan if he's not at the mic. And I definitely want to hear him.
Sorry, and I was saying it's a little bit Pandora's box because again, the structure of our code accumulates. So in the C district, we allow for the 1,500 for, let's see, multifamilies can be at 1,500. So then if we're moving two family to 1,500, then we got to then open up and change C district also potentially. You know, again, it is possible, but
But we're
a lot
not
of things
changing
are like
C currently, right? That's staying at 1,000?
Right.
But you're saying if we went down to 1,250 for B, we would have to go open C?
Well, what I'm saying is like you're creating then a denser district below the C district for, right? Because then you could do, I mean, it could work maybe. I guess I worry that like we're then creating a B district that potentially, I mean, but maybe that's the type of housing we want is more two-family dwellings. And, you know, so we're gonna encourage people to start building two families in the B district rather than multifamily.
A duplex boom.
Yeah, we would have maybe a duplex boom, which I don't, it's not
Gone the
necessarily
opposite
worst thing.
direction in recent years, it seems, converting duplexes over to single family. So,
Yeah, we did it, and somebody feel free to correct me, like, if we're framing these as like, we're trying to get rid of the barriers that we observe, I don't think we see a lot of, at the Board of Adjustment, people running up against the two-family minimum lot size, but you
I
know
agree.
more
It
about.
that doesn't feel like one that's there often. Oh, yeah. That doesn't feel like one that's there often. You know, and this kind of started as how do we stop those variances and preventing people? Again, a little bit like Pandora's box, we could keep pulling this thread, but then it becomes the overhaul.
So,
yeah,
but yeah,
so
something to
Jake,
consider.
let me ask a question. So do we have market input from builders on this? I know we're looking at what happens at the Board of Adjustment, but we don't get two families. Maybe there's a reason we don't get two families. So, I mean, have we set up any process where we take market information from builders formally in a structured process?
In the upgrade, we're going to do a lot of that. I'll say we didn't do that much of that for this, not because we didn't want to, but we were trying to move quick.
Right.
But yeah, in the zoning upgrade process, we absolutely need to hear kind of early and
Right.
often from
And
people.
so
actually
this
trying to build.
process could be revisited in the context of the overall zoning rewrite. Again, there's no harm in changing it a year and a half later, tweaking something if we find 1,250 makes more sense than 1,500. But okay.
And I'll say, I mean, I don't feel a personal opposition to 1,250. I do want to make clear that if we changed it in B, that is in effect changing it in A, which is I don't know if that feels like more of a change than we're bargaining for. And that's part of why we ran this too, which is like, where are two families existing now? Like what lots have they, as if buildings have preferences, but what lots have two families liked to be on? Definitely more than 2,000 square feet. And we're catching like 86% of them with the 3,000 square foot minimum. And then as soon as you're in C, which is a huge chunk of the city, then we're catching all of that. But it's a judgment call, for sure.
Yeah, and again, I think as to your point, we'd be catching most. I could go either way personally on this, given the zoning overhaul again. I think I might just offer up the amendment though and see how my fellow commissioners feel about it and go from there. But yeah. And no more further questions for me. So Miriam, would you mind going back to the staff recommendation, please?
Yeah, that the planning commission would find this zoning text change reforming minimum lot size regulations to be in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan and recommends approval to the Board of Aldermen, and just pulling back up the recommendation subject to any amendments.
Great, thank you. Well, I will make a motion to approve the new minimum lot size regulations with the amendment that we reduce the two-family and townhouse required square footage from 1,500 down to 1,250. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Do you want a discussion?
Oh, do we have to do discussion on that?
If there is any.
I don't.
So if I didn't want the amendment, I could.
You could vote no, and then we could do a new motion. No,
We'll do a roll call.
Yep, please.
All right, let's start at the top here. I should call the chair last. Alderwoman Schweitzer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
and Chair Banton.
Aye.
And the motion passes with all present voting aye.
Great, thank you. All right, big news, everyone. Good work. With that brings us to the end of our action items, and we have more exciting discussion and presentation to go. So I will pass it on to our friend Scott Ogilvie.
Hello, commissioners. Are you ready for informational updates? Good evening. My name is Scott Ogilvie, Program Manager here at the Planning and Urban Design Agency. Also with me is Jackie Knight to my right, Project Manager for the TMP with CMT. Last month, we ended up with a fairly long presentation on the goals and themes of the TMP in support of a memo which was distributed at that time. So this month, we're going to try to pare it back slightly and boil things down to their essence, also to make space for Miriam's next tornado recovery presentation. But the goal of tonight's outline is to get into the chapters of the TMP with an overview and to prepare the Planning Commission for when we have the full draft plan. So you have a little sense of what will be in it and won't be surprised by some of the things you see when that plan is ready to be distributed. Reminder, this is the mission statement of the TMP to create a safe, connected and well-maintained transportation network that enhances quality of life, fosters equitable mobility options, and supports sustainable growth in our city. I want to kind of underline safety here, the top theme of the TMP. Many of you will know that one of our core team members on the TMP. Commissioner of the Disabled, David Newberger, was actually recently fairly seriously injured in a car crash while he was on his way to work, crossing the street. David uses a wheelchair, and as he was crossing Forest Park Parkway, he was hit by a turning vehicle. He is recovering. He's in a rehabilitation center at the moment. I talked to him this afternoon, and he expressed that he wants people to know that this happened, and to highlight this as a reason why we need to continue to emphasize safety and planning and projects and project delivery. And of course, we are all wishing for the speediest recovery possible for him and to have him back on the team. We've gone into the introduction in the past, which covers the themes and goals and the public engagement we've done on the TMP so far. So tonight, we're going to do a quick overview of some chapters, including the Safety Action Plan, Policy and Ordinance Review chapter, Street Design Framework, which Jackie Knight will discuss, and connectivity and mobility chapter. Uh-oh. Okay, it's back. So the Safety Action Plan chapter is really an important part and one of the most data intensive sections of the TMP. Just a reminder that our goal, as currently stated, is a 50% reduction in serious injuries and fatalities by 2050, which is an achievable goal if we continue to make investments. Safety Action chapter has a very data-driven analysis and understanding of safety priorities, very detailed series of high injury networks, expanded corridor details in the Safety Action Plan appendix. So it's going beyond just kind of maps of the city and diving into specific crash factors in the high injury network corridors, short-term and long-term strategies for making safety improvements. This is just one example map of what will be many maps of the different types of high injury networks in the city. This is the all modes map. There's also separate maps for pedestrians, cyclists, and there's a variety of maps that factor in different types of crash factors like reckless driving or impaired driving. This is a one-page example of what's in the appendix. So it's a deeper dive, sort of something that looks a little bit more like what we would call a traffic study that we typically do. And so this analysis has been done on the high injury network corridors, I think on 18 corridors, generally traveling many miles, as well as some crash hotspots. And so when we get into using the TMP to prioritize projects and to start scoping projects and thinking about the length of the project and the amount of investment needed, there's already some foundational input into helping us make those early decisions on projects. Moving into the policy and ordinance review chapter, we interviewed a lot of city staff and got a lot of input from the planning team, staff in different departments, from the public. We took those thoughts and recommendations, condensed them into 4 areas, including capital budget and planning, traffic safety, calming and enforcement, requirements related to new development and utilities, and public engagement and data. And we looked at a lot of peer cities, more than just on this list, but I think some key ones that are familiar to most St. Louis residents, including Kansas City, Louisville, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and others. And these are just some of the highlighted recommendations from the policy and review chapter. There's many more covering other topics, but I just wanted to, I think these are some of the really potentially very impactful ones, and some recommendations that will require political action beyond the Planning Commission. So a big one is planning and funding of arterial streets should generally be removed from the Ward Capital Program and moved into what I would call a citywide approach. A predictable revenue stream for arterial street paving and reconstruction should be identified so that the city is able to consistently plan, program, and fund arterial maintenance and resurfacing across the city. If you map those arterial streets, it's about 138 miles of streets that the city is responsible for. And if you look at the goals in the TMP, safety, quality, and maintenance, those arterial streets are where you have the most crashes, most injuries, most fatalities, and oftentimes the most significant and impactful deferred maintenance issues as well. We as a city should move away from making the 50-50 sidewalk program kind of the primary sidewalk program, which is a property by property based program, and move to a block by block program to maximize accessibility from curb ramp to curb ramp, intersection to intersection, rather than property by property. And looking forward, the city should really look to build core capacities in asset management, so infrastructure, asset management, project planning, project management, maintenance and operations, as the city moves to transition into a Department of Transportation, which will occur in 2029. This plan is going to make some recommendations on those core capacities. It's not going to, design the whole staffing program for a DOT, but it'll point to things we should be able to do. Now, next slide, Jackie is going to talk about the street design framework, and then we will both be available for questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, commissioners, for having me tonight. My name is Jackie Knight. I'm a project manager at CMT and the project manager for the TMP. So the street design framework, I think all of the TMP is really exciting, but this is a really exciting component of the TMP because it really sets forward a vision for what every street in the city of St. Louis could look like in the future. So it's a guided vision and tool that outlines every street and how that street is intended to support adjacent land uses, as well as multiple modes of transportation. So this is a new way of looking at how our streets are better servicing our neighborhoods and people that live in the neighborhoods, people that are doing business in the neighborhoods, as opposed to just moving vehicular traffic through places. It's a consistent approach. It was refined multiple times throughout this process and really seeks to strike a balance between mobility, access, and the quality of the public realm. So what is included in the street design framework chapter? We have 16 street types that's based on roadway functional classification. So how a road is serving a network for vehicular capacity and access, but then also other factors, like I just mentioned, some of those adjacent land uses, and then even thinking, more about central area streets and things like that. It's going to be an illustrated or is an illustrated guide to show design features. So illustrative street renderings that are showing typical right-of-ways for those street types in the city of St. Louis and various elements within different zones of that street. And then this is a really great starting point for project design, setting goals for specific projects and even engagement components of specific projects. Before, projects have been really done on a case-by-case basis, even scoping out project design or study elements with firms that were working for the city. But this guide is really a tool to be used as a starting point moving forward during that scoping process. And then in that design guide, it shows design elements for all street types. So this matrix is just an example of the 16 street types. I want to point to the top where we have kind of the area of the streets, the neighborhoods, central areas, mixed use corridors, open space and industrial. And then across the side, we have things like thinking about the typical traffic volumes, and then the role that the street is playing within the network. So you can see where the roadway elements, the functional classification is merging with the land use, typical land use context to identify what these 16 different street types are. This map is an example to show that every street in the city of St. Louis is assigned a street type, and this is what serves as a starting point for design considerations. I know you can't see what all the colors of the lines are on that map, but all of those 16 street types that were on the matrix in the previous slide are represented on this map so that city can use it moving forward when thinking about scoping design projects on corridors. This is an example of one cross section. So this would be our neighborhood local street, and this is an example of a calm street. And we're going to get into some of those overlays that we have developed within the street design guide. But you can see across the bottom of the image is the typical right-of-way conditions for that street type in the city of St. Louis. There's the different zones identified within the street. Another thing, I keep saying street, but another thing that the TMP really seeks to do is start focusing on streets and sidewalks. And so really talking about transportation projects as streets and sidewalks projects, moving to that block by block sidewalk program. But so this shows the zones within the streets and sidewalks, and then various elements that would be included in a calm street application. This is just another example of a neighborhood scale, but this is a neighborhood connector where you can see again the different elements prioritized in the zone, from the roadway to the curbside zone to the amenity zone. A connector might be serving more, through trips, longer trips between neighborhoods. So then in this specific example, there's an example of a bike facility, as someone might be traveling on the street by bike to make some longer trips and getting a more separated facility. So the elements that are included in the street design framework chapter are the roadway configurations and thinking about travel lanes needed for vehicular movement, pedestrian enhancements, sidewalk widths, things like that, bicycle facilities, different bike types, transit facilities, getting into coordination with Metro on where some of their priority routes are and what should be included in that for transit facilities. The curbside zone, which is that space adjacent to the curb, could be used for parking, could be used for cycle track, things like that. The amenity zone, what's behind the curb, and then also things like traffic operations and signal updates. This is an example of a page layout. So you can see this is a neighborhood connector. There's that illustration at the top of the page with some key descriptors about the page, typical roadway characteristics, land use considerations, and then the matrix on the other side of the page actually goes through what those design elements are within each category, what the elements are, and then at the top, and it's color coded, those elements are from strongly recommended to optional. So really, again, helping us scope the project, looking at the road, identifying the design type, and looking at the features that should be recommended in order to achieve that vision. The other element that goes hand in hand with the design guide is our modal hierarchy. And so modal hierarchy refers to the transportation modes that we are prioritizing on streets. And so we're developing a set of 5 overlays that are overlaid with that street type map. Pictured on the screen is our Calm Streets map. This was actually developed in conjunction with our safety action plan. I know you heard it in great detail about the goals at the last meeting, but safety is a big goal, and also planning our transportation network for children is another important goal of the TMP. Calm Streets do that. And so we really focused this specific overlay on connectivity between schools and parks and making some connections on those local roads. That's just one example. We're also working through a bicycle emphasis overlay, which is basically the future bike network. And so thinking about where are we prioritizing bikes, transit emphasis network, park access locations, and then also within the safety action plan, we've developed a map of lane reduction candidates. And so those would be candidates for potential lane reduction considerations when moving forward to design on those roadways. The other chapter that goes hand in hand with the street design framework is our connectivity and mobility chapter. And so this is basically tying the street design framework together to implementation and thinking about how people are moving around the city. So we're going to be focusing on topics like multimodal integration and moving people by all modes of transportation, accessibility for all. So prioritizing elderly people, children, and people living with disabilities in our engagement process and also our project process. Also mobility as a service and how people are getting goods and services that have limited mobility options. And then of course, a focus on regional collaboration moving forward when the TMP is complete. So we do have some upcoming public engagement. Our June public engagement was postponed, and we, as of today, have officially rescheduled all of our meetings. We have a bike workshop planned for July 14th at the Forest Park Visitor Center in the trolley room. And the specific focus of that meeting is the bike overlay network. So we're gonna, very briefly cover everything in the TMP, but really fine tune get some comments back on the map and thinking about that bike overlay network. And then we'll have our draft plan open house that same week in Tower Grove on July 16th at the Piper Palm House. And then that Saturday, July 19th, will be at the Rock Church from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So we're gearing up for those meetings right now. So the upcoming milestones that we're working through as our plan drafting continues, we've been going through an iterative review process of chapters with the core team and kind of submitting ththings in pieces as we have them so that we can get comments back and work to incorporate comments as we're continuing to draft the remainder of the plan. We'll have a workshop or offer up a workshop with the planning commissioners once the draft plan is complete and we work through that draft plan with the core team and then open up the plan for public comment for final approval by the planning commission. And okay, that's the last slide. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Scott and Jackie. Great presentation. I will open it up to commissioners. Alderwoman Schweitzer. She have to head out. Alderwoman Clark Robin.
No questions, thank you.
No questions.
Sure, Garmendia.
I just had a request. Can we get a centerfold of street design, like neighborhood street with the new, because I'd like to have a big poster put behind my office chair. So I don't know if we're even getting a printed version of this. Are we gonna get-
Yeah, there'll be a printed version.
Can it have? Just kidding. But I would like it, actually, you know.
You want
Kidding,
all
not
of the kind of street type spreads on one big page. I think, yeah, if that ends up not being part of the official deliverable, we can work something out afterwards and we can put it together here. Sure. Oh,
Biggest we can
please.
make was that size.
Okay. Actually, one element that is really cool that will be included with the deliverable is we are doing a street design framework handout. It's like a booklet that can be given out to the public during a public engagement process for transportation projects in the future. And we're also developing an educational video that will live well beyond the TMP to be able to inform people and even people working on projects about the street design framework as an educational tool.
That's really cool. Thank you.
No questions. I'm just excited about this. I mean, being a part of it a little bit myself. I look forward to seeing a lot about the 50/50 program moving to a block by block program. I want to understand more about how we're gonna change some of the ward capital being used for planning and funding, like taking that money from that bucket. And I want, not now, you don't have to go.
Yeah,
into it
well,
now, but I do want to
make-
hear more about that.
yes. So I do want to, I don't want to go too deep into this right now necessarily, because it's supposed to be a quick overview, but the recommendation of the plan is not necessarily to take ward capital and move it to arterials. If you look at the needs across the entire system, the revenue from ward capital is not sufficient to cover the needs of the whole transportation system. And as we talked to the public and talked to staff and really looked at, you know, how do we meet the goals of the plan? We need to think about having sufficient revenue from a new revenue source to meet the needs of the arterials and probably focusing the ward capital sort of inside of neighborhoods, but maybe leaving that to sort of a similar process as exists today. It's a funding source that fits better with smaller scale projects rather than corridor or arterial projects. And so let it do that, but then have like a sort of city-wide or like staff focused program that delivers these arterial projects, sort of akin to how we've been doing the ARPA repaving corridors, but on, you know, a sustainable scale, not 5 or 6 a year, more like 1 or 2 a year, something along those lines. And there are some potential funding options, but I just wanted to clarify because I don't want to pit ward capital or neighborhood needs against like arterial needs necessarily. I think there's a way they should be different programs to meet different goals. But thanks for letting me expound on that.
And that's it. That's all.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
I love it. Thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Miller.
So how far along in this process? Because I had a question. I looked at the map you had up before with the plan, yeah, and so like the NGA area was not identified, so I know a lot of planning is going on over there. I mean, there wasn't any bike paths, so are we, would you say 70% where you want to be, or you're 90%? I just want to.
Probably closer to 70 to 80, I would say. So I think, you know, the challenge with like reviewing, so all 16 street types have this type of documentation, then the map that goes along with them that shows where those street types are, and then some additional sort of context and explanation around it. In this setting, I think it's really hard to get into the nitty gritty of all that, or to get into the nitty gritty of the maps. So we wanted to have the whole draft plan. So commissioners could see, you know, here's the Calm Street map, here's the safety priorities, kind of all alongside each other, deliver that all at once. And I think that'll be kind of like a more fruitful discussion with all the material in front. But we wanted to provide this as a sort of just a sneak preview of what you're going to see with the full draft plan.
If you go back to the map you had before, the Calm, with the Calm streets was the number, was the orange.
Yeah, is it? It's either this way or there it
That
is.
one, there
Yeah.
you go, that one. So I said earlier, I guess you based that on the accident data that you had. How did you select those areas? Was it somewhat architectural? Some was it related to safety? I mean, some of the configuration of the neighborhood. How did you?
Yeah, it's a few things. So to try to summarize, some of it's the characteristics of the street itself.
Right.
So calm streets tend to be sort of your typical neighborhood street, which is usually one lane in each direction with parking. These were frequently linking sort of higher level bike facilities or planned bike facilities like greenways into neighborhoods. They were also based on the location of schools and parks. So providing kind of a lower stress away from the busy roads network for people to navigate to schools and parks. So all those factors were kind of in the mix. And I think that's what got us here. I think we can definitely take input on the exact locations through that review process. And I think the way these maps work is they are not frozen in time. So they can be updated as time goes on. And, you know, the neighborhood planning process, we're kind of expecting the neighborhood planning process to be one of the places that might provide recommendations to update these maps.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
No comments at the moment.
One comment, one question. First of all, I just want to first acknowledge all of the great work that the city has been doing up to this point in relation to its some of its major street projects. It's great to see projects like 4th Street, 7th Street, Tower Grove Connector getting announced and being executed. So hats off to Board of Public Service and everyone involved in that. That's great to see. And this is very exciting as well. My one question is, as it relates to this planning effort overlapping with the neighborhood planning effort, but also the sustainability action plan. There's some overlap there, and I'm thinking, for example, on some of those diagrams you have, you show street trees, and I'm curious on if there has been any overlap or conversation with the sustainability team on, like, we recommend street trees on every street, or there's stormwater infrastructure that we could be implementing as part of these street design and things like of that nature.
Yeah, the sustainability plan, I think, was very interested in those topics, and we had a number of discussions on it. The sustainability plan has like a mobility focused section that sets some, I would say, sort of aspirational goals. I think here we wanted to get into a little bit more detail. And so, not in any of the slides tonight, but there is a discussion of street trees and appropriate, size for places to put street trees. I think in the context of a mobility plan, we want to, I want to be realistic in some ways, right? And it acknowledged tensions and trade-offs. So there's a tension between accessibility and like a, you know, mature street tree canopy, because big trees require a lot of space, they impact sidewalks. So, you know, we want to acknowledge those things are in tension. There's a tension between what I'll call like really aesthetically pleasing stormwater management systems in the street and maybe delivering a needed safety project somewhere else, or, you know, the staffing required to take care of those stormwater things. So I don't want this to be I want this to be a plan that has aspirations, but doesn't promise everything everywhere
But
in
those
a way
things
that's not.
are at least mentioned and
Yeah,
somewhat
cer-
discussed
yes.
in this. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. With that, I applaud and thank Scott and Jackie for the presentation. We will move on to our last, well, not last, but last big discussion topic of the evening, which is the tornado impact and recovery.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry for stepping away or discussing some of the details of what we're about to discuss. So, I mean, obviously the tornado, this is a day after the 1 month, 1 month since the May 16th tornado. I think it's impossible to overstate how damaging and devastating that is for the city. And so, number one, I just thought like it made sense to acknowledge that with some discussion here with this commission that's charged with guiding kind of the future growth and development of the city. Because I know many individuals on the commission and in this room have been very directly involved in response efforts and have a lot of, I think, insight to bring to the table. And so interested in collecting that to figure out what can be done here, or what at least we should be thinking about. And we have a lot of kind of planning initiatives going on, including like focused in neighborhoods that were impacted. And so I thought it made sense to kind of share very high level thinking about that, or at least kind of describe the tensions that I think we all feel with wanting to move those things forward as quickly as possible, because the plan and guidance for these neighborhoods' future is maybe it feels even more urgent now, but also, you know, it's hard for people to drop their really immediate like logistical challenges and to step away from the trauma a lot of people have experienced to, you know, attend a planning meeting. So there's a tension there. And I think there are some zoning policy things that could make a difference. And so wanted to get that in the discussion tonight in case the Planning Commission thought it made sense to move forward with any of these, just kind of out of respect for the sort of prioritization process, wanted to make sure that this was a discussion before anything showed up, you know, in your packet. All of this is very dynamic. So I don't think, you know, we have all the answers, and certainly not all of the ideas, and we don't have a lot of the perspective on all of this yet. But we just thought it was important to at least start a conversation about how planning and zoning, kind of the responsibility of this commission, can help the city adapt to the new circumstances caused by the tornado. So in this update, going to hit on a couple of emerging zoning policy ideas for the near and medium term, and then kind of talk about where our heads are at with all of the planning initiatives that are underway in this new context. I mean, a couple of framing goals, which were listed in the memo, but maybe don't bear repeating at depth, but I think there are a few, which is removing regulatory and procedural barriers to kind of things our city needs to do to recover as much as we can, also streamline processes. I think a real focus on housing and what we can do to expand attainable housing in impacted neighborhoods, so people have kind of every opportunity that we can make available through planning and zoning anyway, to remain at home, and if not at home, in neighborhoods, and if not in their neighborhoods, in the city. Also, I think is the goal to kind of leverage the planning processes we have underway to inform what can happen in the future. We've kind of convened residents to plan with us. And I think that is an asset for shaping the conversations about what needs to happen. Some of that, though, will need to adapt. And of course, we need to handle all of this with sensitivity, because I think there's a lot of, trauma, also fear about speculation and land grabs, and just things that can and do happen in communities that are impacted by major disasters like this, and that have happened in St. Louis even without a major disaster. So I think just, of course, need to approach all this with sensitivity. On the zoning front, I think there are kind of three big themes, which is kind of in the immediate near term, what can be done to establish flexibility for some defined period of time, so people maybe don't have to go through the very or the conventional string of review processes to kind of just get things done that they need to get done, like replace a roof, replace a window, rebuild a wall. I think there's also a medium-term set of conversations about for the period of time after that emergency flexibility is in place, where we're kind of going back to full administration of the zoning code, even in impacted neighborhoods, where are there things we need to change about the zoning code to reduce barriers to rebuilding and remaining kind of at home or in the neighborhood. I think also there's a lot of interest and need for temporary housing structures where people can remain at home or in their neighborhoods, maybe while they're rebuilding, or as a temporary housing option until they can find new permanent housing. So I think those are three broad buckets. And then I think it's, very clear that as we're rewriting the code through the zoning upgrade, we need to think ahead for situations like this and bake in disaster preparedness to that code, so we don't have to kind of think on our feet in the future if there is a future flood or a future earthquake or any number of things that can and do happen in cities across the world. So I think that is on our mind very much too for the new code. And so I'm just going to share a little bit more about some of our specific ideas that may make sense to amend the zoning code. It's still a very dynamic situation where we're trying to figure out internally, how much flexibility is in place right now. How long will that kind of immediate response flexibility remain in place? If it would be helpful to expand on that, I'm probably not the right person to do it, but other members of the team can. So I think this is all a little fluid. We don't know how time sensitive some of these things might be, but we just want to get them on the table for you all to kind of think with us. So the first zoning policy change idea is to expand flexibility for non-conforming structures. Buried in a chapter of our code called General Regulations is a section called Damage to Non-Conforming Buildings. And it reads like this, where if your building is damaged but maintains like 40% of its value, so the damage comprises only 60% of a building's physical value, then it can be restored within 12 months. Except that, then all of that stuff. And if the damage is more than 60%, it can be restored, but via a conditional use process if it's a non-conforming structure. So say you live in a historic home in a neighborhood that was damaged by the tornado. If your building was damaged, half damaged, and it's a whole other question, like how this would even be measured. This is not kind of an assessment folks have had to make before, so I'll put that to the side. But say your building was half damaged, as long as you get your application in within 12 months, you can rebuild it as it was. If you don't get it in within 12 months, then you might have to get on an agenda for a conditional use permit, a hearing, and that may take some time, especially if a lot of people are in the same situation as you. That could be a significant backlog. And, does that really make any sense at all? This is just a home where you've been living. Why is it a conditional use just because it was damaged? Up, at 50% of its value, whatever that might mean. Also, if you haven't resolved your, disputes people certainly will be having with insurance companies, or if they just haven't assembled the money, a lot of people, of course, don't have insurance. If for whatever reason you can't get your permits in within 12 months, then again, you're back at that conditional use hearing. Does that make sense? Not sure. Also, say you wanted to rebuild your house, but not just as it was. Maybe you want to, or need to, for some reason, like move a wall into the setback. That also would not be allowed. That would be expanding the nonconformity. And is that the type of rigorous standard we want to hold people to kind of rebuild exactly their home? I think my feeling is no, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to rebuild their homes if they're in the position to do that. And I understand a lot of people may not be or may not be soon. So that's one thought. Another thought relates to conditional use approvals, where right now, basically a conditional use permit is only good for a year. So if you get your permit, but don't open up within a year because maybe there is a tornado or you just didn't get your financing place. If you don't open up within a year, you need to apply again. There is this clause in here related to an exception for being quote unquote told by a force majeure that kind of can be interpreted to allow, as you know, I'm not an attorney, but to allow some flexibility from this. Force majeure, of course, like implies a, natural disaster beyond folks' control. But this isn't something that there's ever been kind of a policy around in the past. Right now, this is kind of potentially an informal option, but it's possible that a specific determination would be made. And also it just may not cover everybody's circumstance, because also say you got your conditional use permit, it was for a very specific building for a very specific use with very specific conditions. Maybe something's changed, and if any of those things changes, then your conditional use permit is no longer valid, even if you get it in within a year or get it open within a year, or even if there is a process or policy established around interpreting this exception for force majeure. So those were two big ideas, or I don't know, ideas, I don't know that they're big. I'll maybe look to my zoning section colleagues and others to see if they have anything to add in describing those ideas, or even other ideas that have come to mind since we sent this out. We've just been noodling on this a lot as a team to figure out what could make sense.
Yeah, again, Evan. But a lot of these ideas really stem from like phone calls that Catherine and I get during the day of like, okay, somebody calls and is like, well, our garage was destroyed, but we want to take this opportunity to now build an ADU above. Or then you also have folks who are like, hey, like the whole house is gone. We can't afford to stay in the hotel still. We're just going to put up this RV. And I'm basically like, okay, like, so, I mean, there is kind of this like daily flux of, or like a fluid of what is taking place. Currently, I'm aware of at least, there's kind of one point person handling individuals that have been hit by the tornado and are trying to get permits for essentially just rebuilding what has maybe been destroyed, like the walls or the chimneys or the windows. The fees are being waived for those things. But when it gets a little bit more complicated, and we don't even see it. So zoning doesn't even need to see those at this point. I don't know how long that will last, or, like at what point they determine that, oh, you do need a permit, you're expanding. These are some of the things I'm not privy to at this point. But, based on our current codes, I can imagine scenarios where like people are still trying to get their money a year from now, and like they now want to rebuild, but they've lost their conditional use permit, or like their whole house is gone as opposed to, just 60% of the home. And it then becoming a barrier as we're still working towards our new code. Yeah, so these were just some ideas. We did talk about side yards as maybe another possibility. And we're open to other thoughts too, if you guys have ideas, because yeah, people are hurting and are trying to rebuild their lives. So I think this conversation is important for that reason.
Just a quick question for the term non-conforming, like for all those examples we just talked about, for houses that probably don't have what is now a current side yard setback, would they, like, is that an example of if that house is destroyed, they would need to go through a conditional use or variance process just to rebuild what's there?
I think exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, or if it's a 4-family building in the A district. So that, like, those are examples that you're referencing of, doesn't conform with the area standards.
Right.
But they're also non-conforming residential uses, like a 4-family in an A district. That, am I correct here? Like that would, if you didn't meet these requirements, you'd be at the conditional use, through the conditional use process.
Right. Or if now your neighbor has moved because they decided not to rebuild at their house, you can't get a maintenance agreement, like, yeah, it snowballs.
So you said informally right now, you have one person kind of handling this. So have we set up like a task force to kind of, I mean, to me, it seemed like the goal would be, if somebody wants to build a house, we're gonna let them build it. Unless, I mean, the one stipulation is the other homeowners, the other houses on the block that are intact. You don't want something that would demean the aesthetic of their property or lessen the aesthetic of their property. But other side yards, they didn't have a side yard before, so how could we make that so that for a period of time, we'd allow it?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I mean,
right
do you
now
need to go
it's,
to the Board of Aldermen, or does the planning commission make a recommendation, or?
I think in terms of this period of time where the zoning code is, where review is being routed around the zoning code, kind of for this emergency situation, I think that I'm not sure yet how to provide input into kind of the scope of that or how long it takes. I think what I would advocate for is providing very clear information to the public about what flexibility is being allowed, how the process is being handled.
Right,
So
exactly.
everybody knows what their options are.
And I have a little concern about people coming from other places who want to take advantage of the situation, but okay, if they're gonna build a house to live in versus a spec house that they want to build to sell, to me, it's a different thing. We're gonna lose so many structures in the next 18 months. Winter is gonna be the scourge of this whole debacle because these buildings are open. Once they freeze, open without heat, it's really, that'll really make the cycle of them coming down faster. But if somebody wants to build in this area, we need people. But I stop short when somebody wants to speculate and not follow the codes versus a homeowner who's building back what they want.
Yeah, so providing the flexibility for the right cases, not, yeah, and having a way to kind of suss out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
are
yes,
here
we
to take
want somebody to
advantage?
come in and build 30 homes. We'd love that, but we want to make an upfront decision whether we're issuing variances and go through the process versus a homeowner who's, hey, it's taken me 18 months to get the money and I want to build my house and I don't have a side yard. Do we need to go through a conditional use for that? I would hope we could figure out a way to get around that.
I just had a question about kind of maybe the origin of these clauses. Obviously we can't go back in time and read their minds, and probably the notes on when this was put in our code are scanty. But I wonder whether, is the intention of this clause at that time of history, do we know when it was put in there at all?
1950, 57, somewhere. in
Yeah,
there.
so I feel like that time period was about they changed a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was to create a, the grandfathering in, it's all like gentle kind of it's gradual change to a vision of a conforming city. And I don't feel like, that's not a value I have. I like how weird St. Louis is. So I do think it's a bit of a relic overall, as just a whole clause. And I am imagining like 60% of the physical value, like how do you measure that?
Yeah.
And so I think that's just, it is a clause that is not designed to benefit people impacted by disaster. And that should be our guiding star.
What prohibits us from just allowing someone to build to the spec of their existing home?
Yeah.
Just period. If it looked that way before, you can rebuild it the same way.
So I have like input on that. I was gonna ask this. So if you own a home and you get insurance and it's a brick home, I'm sure you've been told before that whatever your payout is, if your house gets destroyed, will not build this house again. So my kind of thing that I'm kind of hesitant on is the restored within 12 months, because restoring a house that's from 1915, 2-story brick house converted, I don't see it. I mean, maybe you guys see it otherwise, but I don't see that house going back exactly how it was. Maybe there is going to be some changes. Maybe the basement comes out and now it's skinnier. It's not conforming again. I don't know if there's wiggle room there or if that's even, I don't want to expand this conversation more, but that's my piece that I'm not really catching with.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we're raising this because we may want to change it, right? Like we, for example, could, in the event any non-conforming building has been damaged by blah, 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 it may be restored. Like we don't, I don't know if we need this percentage or this time period. And something that we were trying to think about is we've talked also with the zoning upgrade team about how other codes handle this because, they work in all sorts of places. And I think they referenced an idea that maybe you could allow the nonconformity to expand to some maximum amount, and maybe it's not a non-conforming use, but just non-conforming area standards. So you could like, yeah, build into that side yard, or you could maybe not perfectly match whatever prior setback you had. I don't know if we know yet how to write that, but that's something we've been talking about so you don't have to build it back exactly, but like close. What's the big deal?
And then adding some, guardrails for safety, of course, like still far enough away not to let fires jump houses.
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that.
I think, the building code would remain in place. I think that's really important. We want
This one is,
people to
this is
build safely.
specific to a condition in which someone wants to rebuild a home that's non-conforming.
Yeah, that's right.
That was also damaged by this tornado.
That's right.
Or, and then maybe moving forward for natural disasters in the future.
Yeah, so this is like one part of our code that exists, and I've just highlighted the stuff that I think maybe shouldn't be in this situation. But yeah, this is damage to non-conforming buildings, the way that's handled in our code. It's also non-conforming businesses or commercial businesses. There's a separate section about how non-conforming residential uses are treated, which is like pretty kindly, just generally speaking in our code, but not entirely kindly. It does, I think, Christina or Commissioner Kerman, you described it well. It's like, it's sort of gentle, pushing everybody to the future that the planners of the time envisioned.
I will say that I agree that there should be like zero barriers to rebuild as you would, and the time frame to do that should be much further extended. I am very wary of allowing non-conforming items to be able to be done without any sort of review or permit process, without guardrails. I could see, for example, oh, look, now is my opportunity to build a attached garage to my house without having any review of that. That could have a huge impact to the streetscape, neighborhood, things of that nature. So I think that has to be done carefully. Like, for example, sure, if you want to move a window, 3 feet over to the left, big whoop. Like if it's within the same footprint, within the same elevational height, maybe there's some, or, things get moved and they're still within what the current, regulations allow, then sure. But I think that we have to be careful still on allowing what can be done, because, for example, someone could come in, whether it's homeowner or a speculative builder, use this opportunity, this loophole to build a bunch of suburban homes, for example, that destroy the character of the neighborhood. So I think we have to carefully look at that. I think there's a way, but it definitely needs guardrails, in my opinion.
One of the things to focus on is we're not asking for any action items tonight. This is a discussion based on observation, based on concerns. And one of the things that we're really pleased about our staff is many went out every day at some point in the day to visit the community and provide some service. When they provided that service, they were also listening and observing. And that's a wonderful thing, to be there so you experience what is the trauma, what is the hope, and then you tie it in with some things that are in the bureaucracy, and it's reasonable to come up with, hey, let's tire kick a few things today. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I would say, if these ideas feel like generally on target from the commissioner's perspective, then we can continue exploring them and use the themes from this discussion to come back with a specific recommendation. And also, there's a lot happening internally that we need, I think, to continue to coordinate with and understand more deeply. So I think this is intended as a kind of temperature taking, like, do you want us to continue to explore this? And I think a lot of the comments you shared are really helpful. Like, what are the parameters for how to explore this? So when we come back with a recommendation, is kind of in keeping with what you all are seeing in terms of balancing this flexibility with some guardrails, so speculative, predatory, or just like inappropriate from a design point of view, things don't occur or aren't facilitated.
And it gets complicated in some other lanes, certainly in the historic preservation aspect of it, and also people's resources aspect. So in this room, can't remember whether it was this morning or yesterday morning, we had SEMA in and explained all the things in detail about the good news is in much of our community where this trauma has hit, the resources are poor. I mean, there are not many available resources, the level of insurance aren't. So good to hear about resources that might be able to come to folks to be able to do things that are both basic for human needs, livability in their family, and that contextual thing of the place in the neighborhood they make. That was a good thing to hear. And there's still, unfortunately, what we're sort of talking about, there's still a clutter of bureaucracy that hovers over all this, is how do we intersect and make sure that that doesn't keep good things from happening for the well-being of the folks that are living in these neighborhoods.
We had discussed a few days after the tornado hit, having a sort of a catalog of 20, 30, 40 building plans of single family homes, multifamily homes that you can just build without having to get a permit or whatever it is you would need to get to do this. Can you talk a bit about where we're at with that and how long that might take to get done?
Yeah, so there are, there's this other kind of category of stuff like adapting active and upcoming planning initiatives, and that's one of them. I've kind of highlighted all the things that are relevant to this conversation. We can come back to this. This is the neighborhood planning areas, active and upcoming, but all or many of the activities that we proposed, like first, 2 years ago and now like a year and a half ago, and this HUD grant, the pro housing program, like a lot there. If we can do them quickly, they could be pretty helpful. So here's a list of what some of those are funded by this pro housing grant that the city was awarded by HUD. So it's competitive HUD program. I've put an asterisk next to things where we would be leading it or just deeply involved. Some of it is like, more funding to completely fund the zoning upgrade, some more capacity for the Cultural Resources Office to continue their work, updating historic district standards, some CDA stuff, updating affordability policies, some infill work that CDA is going to lead, housing infill, and then some capacity, and then also resources to support just ongoing action planning for affordable housing. But what Commissioner Jorgensen is mentioning is this affordable housing design book, or quote unquote, like pre-approved plans, was something that there's actually been like an internal kind of interdepartmental working group on this floor thinking about that for a while. And when we were writing this grant, we were like, well, that'd be great. Let's do it. Let's propose it. It's in the grant that's funded. And we almost have a draft RFP. There are some things that need to, well, I'll describe the idea. A lot of cities have done this, including South Bend, Indiana, that I know Rasmus is aware of, where there's a book of plans that maybe they're not like stamped drawings, like you could pick them up and build them without any city or building code review, but it gives you a head start. It's like, if you're a small developer and you want to build some housing, you start with like, oh, this is something that conforms to like the basic regulations of zoning and other stuff. And also kind of a guidebook of what the process is going to be. So people can like see the stuff and then take it and run with it. So instead of having to have done this a million times or have to like call a bunch of people to navigate the process, or be like a large sophisticated developer who like has consultants that can help you, this should be like everything you need to get started. So we going to make this. PDA is going to like take the lead, but this has to be interdepartmental for it to work because, you know, the building division administers the building code. It needs to work at some level for CDA and SLDC. Obviously, the zoning section of the building division is a key partner in this. All of the stuff in here, there are some steps to like get the money from HUD so we can start using it. And and we're not quite there yet. So what we're trying to do is have the RFP drafted, get it out. I think the one thing we can't do is like contract and start until HUD has like approved all of the things they need to approve. Sorry, I'll be less sarcastic in speaking about this process, but so there's that. And yeah, we would just like to do this as quickly as possible.
If I can follow up.
Yeah.
And this may reveal the levels of my ignorance of the work that you guys do. And I'm sure that there will be St. Louis specific things that have to be done, but could we, to speed it up, and I'm worried about your capacity with what
Yes.
you're already doing, and then we're adding all this to it. Could we just steal somebody else's homework to some extent? Like, could we just take what, for example, South Bend has done and steal a bunch of that and say, sorry, but we're kind of in a disaster here?
I mean, they have a different, well, first of all, like, yes, we should start with like the good thinking that cities have already done for us. And I think we've done some of that already in scoping this out. It's a different city, it's a different architectural feel, it's a different book of regulations. So a lot would have to be adapted. And there's no reason not to give ourselves a head start by using their work as a solid baseline. By the way, like, we're not making these plans. We would hire an architect to like make them and ask them nicely to do it as quickly as they can.
To build off of Rasmus's comment, it would be awesome if this stealable book of plans were integrated into the neighborhood planning that's happening in impacted neighborhoods. Right, because it's really like, I think it's going to be like, well, what do you want to see be built rapidly in your neighborhood, and having that kind of, because if we expedite these kind of plans, you're more likely to see a lot of them all built all at once, as a typology. So
100%. Yeah, I think we being like neighborhood planning team and the crew of us like working on this RFP have talked about like architectural preference really ought to be a conversation in the neighborhood planning process. So we're giving tools to builders that match what people want. Like, we don't want to make weird stuff easy, right? Like, we want to make the right stuff easy. And part of the question of what's right is what is going to make people feel like, yeah, this is our neighborhood. So just 100%. Yeah.
Miriam, it might be time to go to this slide.
Yeah, I kind of skipped over it or described it super briefly. And these boundaries of the tornado damage zone, I think those are subject to change. Maybe they have even changed since Jonathan made this map. But this shows how active and upcoming neighborhood planning areas overlap pretty considerably with where the tornado impacted neighborhoods. So the Ville, Greater Kingsway East planning area that is underway, and then the orange and red planning areas, we are either under contract now with firms to help launch that or nearly there. And so that's a whole other set of conversations where it's like, we've got this tension where it's like kind of urgent to get those processes up and going because we need these plans that are like representative of community voice to drive what the future looks like. And like, people are having a rough time right now. Like, is now really, yeah, how do we engage in an appropriate way?
Yep. Yeah, Miriam, you and I talked about this. In the Greater Ville area, there are a lot of changes things are dramatically different than they were on May 15th. And the plan that we have, I don't know, 60% done? 50s, 50%? 50? It's just, there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot more, there's opportunity to do other things. There's other needs. And that a lot of that's not going to settle for 24 months. I think a lot of people think they're going to rebuild their houses. The reality, when they get a FEMA check and it's not as much, and the cost of building, that trauma and that loss is going to settle in the next 24 months. It's not going to settle in 6 months. And we're just it's just going to be dramatically different. I don't know how we keep going on the planning process. And maybe we should, I don't know how we do that and allow for it's going to be dramatically different. I don't know, Aaron.
Yeah, I of course feel the same way, and also leaning into like the areas that weren't severely damaged.
Right.
Because I think part of this too is
That's a good point.
it's one thing for your living conditions to be destroyed. It's another thing layered on top of that when the moments or opportunities for normalcy or progress are also taken away from you. So we need to protect those and still plan for those while we're figuring out how to support people who have been like extremely harmed by the situation.
Yeah.
In the areas where we were planning.
Right.
Now, the areas where we haven't started, I think a deep conversation with community about like, what's most helpful now from this set of skills that we had already lined up for you.
Right.
Would you like to see or that you need would be helpful, but I certainly wouldn't launch into like a new planning process.
So there's going to be a need for a planning process after the tornado. And what Aaron said is true. There's certain areas in Kingsway East, in the Greater Ville, in the Vanderventer neighborhood that were not impacted hardly at all, very little. And those processes make sense to kind of have some normalcy and continue. But to say you're finished with a neighborhood plan for the Ville and the Greater Ville, when
Nobody's saying we're finished.
yeah, well, when we are finished, I'm going to say in 2 years, you kind of need to rethink that, or because we're going to have a lot of different situations than we do right now. And that's what
I hope the good point is from having been there and engaged with the community, that engagement has some gravitas and realization. Can we stay engaged even though it might be to help with momentum, but it might be different.
Yeah.
As opposed to not have that foundation to begin.
Another good point too is that with the planning process already having started, it also affords some very loose layer of protection. Because now you have speculation, or you have people who, I mean, we see it now. They've jumped jumped immediately from how do we help these people stay in their homes to how are we rebuilding or redeveloping? And it's actually, you're talking about new building and new development. And a quick answer is, we'll follow the plan that we were already doing. So that layer of protection is there too. Like I said, very loosely, but it's helpful.
Something that I've been throwing around in my head and that I've spoken with Miriam a little bit about, and I'm curious to get all of yours opinions on, is because there is so many planning efforts already going on, about to begin, would it be helpful as a commission to have perhaps a special meeting somewhere in the area, the affected area, as simply a listening session to hear residents' thoughts about current planning efforts, what they foresee in the future, what they want, you know, what their thoughts are on continuing or holding or moving ahead, or changing directions completely, or just hearing what they fear or think are opportunities to come out of this disaster, and simply use that listening session as a way to inform our decision making about these planning processes moving forward. I anticipate that it'll probably stray away from planning at some point, but I think that's fine. I think residents deserve to have a place to have us and also other city officials listen to what they're dealing with, and maybe a more formalized setting. And I'm curious because if I worry that if you don't do it right, it could be taken the wrong way. But I also think it could be something that folks might welcome. So I'm for.
Well, I'll share just real quickly that yesterday morning, we had a version of that conversation just with the Phil Graterville and Kingsway East Neighborhood Planning Committee members and Cultural Boulevard ambassadors that were available. And I wouldn't say any like decisions were made. It was just a little bit of everybody processing. I do think the general spirit was, well, we got to figure this out. Like we got to stay engaged. So I'm sharing that because a version of that conversation was had just with one group of people involved in the active neighborhood planning area.
Got to build on that as a good thing. Keep the trust and keep the commitment. Some of the big picture stuff is still feeling how the city's going to tell all that. And certainly the mayor is very concerned about that. Resources from SLDC are trying to be decided as to how they can be deployed or what tools can be deployed. So it's what Miriam just said, that there was a certain yesterday of a breath of some good things discussed with momentum. Let's not take away from that. Let's build on that.
Jonathan, are you, I wasn't sure if you were on virtually, but I just saw you on Dylan's screen. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Chair, and good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Jonathan Roper, City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency. And so regarding the kind of like this notion of neighborhood planning and where do we go, that question has been, I don't want to say the answers has been satisfactory or we know exactly where we're going to go, but these questions, a lot of these have been raised about, you know, do we pause or what, or what activities should we pause? What advantages do we have? And just overall, is the objective still there? The neighborhood planning efforts were really built and reviewing that. We talk about housing, we talk about economic development. So even with recovery, we still would talk about those and help guide those. I know one of the big, a few of the big changes has been, I mean, people who can or cannot participate at this point and their levels of participation. So that's one thing, you know, not everyone honestly lives in the city anymore today, at this point. So that's a change. There are people, you know, with other things on their mind or just waiting for FEMA insurance, that uncertainty. So there are just those capability to traumatic effects that people are going for today. But on the opposite side of that, we have heard these plans are helping to guide the future. I mean, the short term, mid-term, and long-term recovery of these neighborhoods and of the city. So when we look to right now, trying to coordinate more with the emergency operations center, what FEMA's guidelines, parameters, and expectations are, and a number of other opportunities. What are those opportunities that are before us today that weren't there before May 16th, for better or for worse? And how can we modify our plans to meet that? And I'll go back to Mr. Commissioner Miller's comments about the area doesn't look the same from May 15th to 16th. So there are a number of items that we really need to look at. Sumner High School and Tandy is a focus point. So is Hickey Elementary in the area. However, the schools, the students there are going to a new school in 2025, 2026. So these are a number of items that we do need to
Just
look
fall of
at.
25,
Oh, I'm sorry. 2025, 2020.
just the fall semester.
Oh, just the fall semester. Okay. So yeah, there are different changes that we need to look at. However, what we're hearing is these plans are these are community focused plans and they will remain that way, doing this with community. So I think it's more just about understanding where people are at, what the opportunities are, and how do we meet the day where we're at. Because if all these departments are leaning on, even before this LRA property, neighborhood planning was helping with, hey, let's create a strategy about all this vacancy that we have that was there before, May 16th. So we're still committed to that same thought and process as well.
Sure, this isn't lost on anybody, but we're trying to navigate the same tension with the zoning upgrade process. I mean, we thought the big public kickoff event was planned for June 11th. That's why we're having this kind of off schedule meeting tonight. We postponed that. We just thought because we would have had to promote it right alongside the communication around really urgent response issues. No, we're not doing it. We're in the process of rescheduling that. I mean, we've gotten preliminary feedback from partners, including some members of the commission. It's like, hey, well, don't slow down exactly. Maybe engagement just has to look different. So we're trying to follow that guidance because, yeah, we need the right zoning regulations in place before, to guide rebuilding.
If I could just say with that and your suggestion about a community meeting, I think it's better to focus the community meetings on things like that or on having, I know the mayor is going out, other elected officials, other department leaders, I think would be more efficient because I'm not sure. I work in communications and I've been involved in a number of town halls. I'm not sure how to sell, hey, the planning commission is coming by. We don't really have an action item, but come talk to us about your thoughts. I think the other part will be more effective and more needed. And I'm worried because it's so important that we do involve the community heavily, but I'd be worried about having meeting fatigue if we do too many things. So I think those other parts are more important. So I don't think we should do something for us.
I agree with that. I think if we were to have a town hall on land speculation, very specific topics that people have brought up that they're concerned about, and then planning commissioners are in attendance, so we can just all hear the same thing. If we're going to have residents come out, have everyone that should be hearing what they have to say about a topic be there, that would be a more effective use of residents' time. And it's, I think it's important we all are working on different mechanisms to, whether it's a zoning update or whether it's some other kind of legislation or operational or volunteer, you know, so all those, I think it'd be important for all of these different parties to hear, to have, you know, to have that insight from residents.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that's a good way of framing it. And also, we do owe these communities an answer. They've been in planning, or they knew that they had planning forthcoming. The last thing they want to hear is that the opportunity was snatched away. And it, you know, they're immediately going to go to, it may never come back. So
One of the things
Tell
about
them
planning
something.
is, it's strategic. It should be about the future. And in these communities, I think there's certainly all the stuff about the daily stuff, but we still have to help make sure we get a better future for folks. It's a collective team effort. And, yeah, a lot of stresses and strains. When I get my chance to make an executive's report, I've taken some notes of things that has hit me.
If I can like make one other suggestion, not on the community part, but could this be, since I feel like this is an opportunity to take some bold action that we already knew was needed, but now the need is so much greater. So could we look at things like, I don't know, like parking minimums, stuff like that, that we know can already be a barrier, and get rid of it?
I think in the upgrade process, I mean, there's no not confronting parking. And the direction from the strategic land use plan is right size or eliminate requirements. So I think that's where we're starting the conversation in the upgrade. If the commission wants to kind of change the prioritization around nearer term zoning amendments, I mean, that can be a discussion. I think at the time, the priorities were kind of being discussed. It was, you know, we know that's a big kahuna. Let's take that on in the upgrade rather than in advance. And I mean, a draft zoning code is like a year away. It's not like the upgrade will be a forever, you know, we just keep talking about it, but no new code shows up. So I think, you know, that's a conversation. I think I have a bias toward integrating that into the upgrade conversation rather than tackling it as a single issue, because I think it is so related to, you know, if it's a means to achieve a better urban form, but we can't get the better urban form with the code we have. And I think it makes sense to include it as part of a more comprehensive conversation. And I want that comprehensive conversation to be bold and right for St. Louis.
City sometimes have yings and yangs. And we have our opportunity, hard work, a lot of hard work going on to carry the ball and move forward and really, really diligent at that. The workload on staff is tremendous at the moment. One of the things I'll talk about just in a few closing minutes are how to be effective.
Well, I think this has been a really good conversation. It sounds like, you know, summarizing some of the discussion here today, that some of these items that we spoke about at the beginning, dealing with changes we can make to rebuild quickly. It sounds like there is interest from this commission to further research and discuss those, perhaps at a future commission meeting. So if that is staff's goal, then I would encourage that to happen. I think we would all be open to hearing more on that and those suggestions. And I also assume that if anyone here has additional thoughts, that planning staff is always interested in in hearing those. So I'd encourage folks to continue to reach out to all the folks here if you have additional thoughts and concerns about these items moving forward. So thank you, Miriam and Don, for those comments. All right. We have on here an update on other major planning initiatives. I don't know if there are anything on that. We just sort of covered a lot of that, I feel.
I think the other key things to know are that, Jonathan, feel free to jump in, that Project Connect neighborhood planning is moving along, hoping to get that before you all before the fall. That's right. It's under SLDC's stewardship. And that could be as soon as August. And so there's that, ADUs in July, and zoning upgrade kickoff and reworked engagement plan to be announced soon. Zoning upgrade community advisory commission, community advisory committee applications are open. At first, those were going to close soon. We thought, no way, we need to keep that open given what's going on. So if you all know anybody who might be interested in applying, please tell them. As you all saw, TMP's kicking butt. The sustainability plan also is coming along really well. Draft is coming together. And Jonathan and his small team are doing a ton of neighborhood planning work.
So just put one more thing on the sustainability plan. It does come to you. It's been in a draft this week that's been reviewed. And I will say, in having our sustainability plan in our U.S. culture and political environment, that now will be a very good thing, and we should be proud of it. It provides a lot of structure and some ambitions, and it's, you know, about the earth and our folks. It's getting close.
Great.
With that, I'm happy to move into the executive director's report. I have a number of things that are on my notes, but the big thing that is striking me is what this gentleman said earlier. Yes, you. He was talking about the zoning overhaul and one piece that we're doing here today. And he used the term, gee, it's overdue. So it's the second best time. Guess what? There's no third best time. And so we kick the can down the road a lot. We do things in cycles. It's pretty amazing that we've gotten the resources. We still need a few more resources to really pull it off, but we're doing this zoning overhaul. And Miriam talked about the June 11th meeting. Had to take a breath as to how that's going to come. That was also going to be a meeting where we had our folks that are part of this team, but are sort of advisors from other cities around the country to be there and speak about it. And so two things. Things in the past that we never did and got it to the best. We have this one second best time. And it's really a really big deal to do that. And we're pleased that our team has experience elsewhere, and they brought these particular folks that were going to be here on June 11th to help give us a context to planning around the country. So it's really good that we have that, as many people have talked about from other places. The second thing I'll mention, I'll make this the second thing. Our forthcoming budget that begins July 1st isn't the most robust one we've ever had. Can say that. But I will say one of the things is in this past 12 months, we've had some budget categories which we've been able to do well with. And one of them is back to this thing about learning from other cities, is sent more people to conferences related to planning and the work that we've done in the last few months than we traditionally were able to do in a year. And we did that on purpose, scrape the bottom to get that and do that, because it's going to be a little bit more limited capacity to be able to do that next year. But it also, by this time, by getting so many staff people to experience planning conferences in other cities with other professionals, I think goes a long way for their preparation and their ability to both, sort of test what we're doing and think properly about best practices. So pretty pleased that many of the people in this room got to go to a conference that they might otherwise not been able to. And it looks like we would not have that much of a robust ability to do that next year. Really happy that the consultants we're bringing in bring practices from other cities to get with the mix. That's all I have to say tonight. Oh, and one other secret sauce. Sorry, it's in my notes here. Alan Jakowski is the city's forestry commissioner. And we did a month of the map of the month with him a while back to show the tree cover in the city. And he knows there are areas of the city where the tree cover is less. And it has an impact on certain diseases, asthma and whatnot. And Alan is so dedicated to that whole factor that tree map is certainly something that we need to be updated after the impact of the storm. He's a pretty special guy in terms of this. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Don. All right, we've reached the end. I want to thank all of the planning staff for all the work you've done this evening, putting together all of our presentations, all of the work that you've been doing as it regards to the tornado recovery effort, research, personal volunteering, and otherwise. Very commendable. I want to give the commission's thoughts to the speedy recovery of David Newberger. Hope that he continues recovering well. And excited to hear more about how we as commissioners can continue the recovery efforts moving forward and planning efforts. And as always, very exciting things coming down the pike as well in terms of all of these initiatives. So thank you all tonight. I'll take a motion to convene. To adjourn. That's the word. That's the word. That's the word. No.
No, adjourn.
Adjourn.
Need a second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Thank you, everyone. Do we need a vote?
No, there's no need for a vote.
Is he in?